You are listening to The Bail Post. Welcome to our next episode of our podcast. Today we have a returning guest. Anne-Marie Schubert has been with us before to talk about criminal justice issues. Anne-Marie, thank you so much for coming back.
Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
What's been going on in California since the last time we talked to you? More crazy?
Well, we threw out a couple bad prosecutors. My friend calls them imposter DAs.
I like
But
that.
it's true. But fortunately, George Gascon is now out, and Nathan Hochman, who's I would characterize as a real prosecutor, who's very balanced in his approach, but is not going to go destroy Los Angeles County, is now in. And then Alameda County, which represents Oakland, they recalled Pamela Price, who had no business being the elected DA of Alameda County, and now they have a new person that was appointed by the board who I think will be very, very good.
Seems like these Soros DAs, when they get defeated, get replaced by law and order DAs, which is very positive.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, every jurisdiction's different. And so, you have to appeal to the needs of your jurisdiction and the wants. And so, when you're dealing with some of these more urban places, I would say that, you want a lot of the constituents want very much of a balanced approach. So it's not just law and order, but it's also second chances and investment in people so we can prevent crime. So all of that I can understand, but we can't just have the chaos of just decriminalizing everything and think that that's going to be a good policy somehow.
I was talking to someone else from California, and I was thinking Gascon's been defeated. We're now on the Yellow Brick Road. Everything is coming up
Yeah.
daisies, and I was really kind of shocked because then I was told, well, no, because now they're having these lawsuits against police departments and doing consent decrees, which is really kind of putting into court orders some of these policies that Gascon had. Have you seen any of that?
I don't know if I follow any lawsuits. I mean, I know that a number of jail systems have consent decrees because of overcrowding and things like that. So that's why you have people that even if they're sentenced to maybe, I don't know, 3 months in jail, maybe they serve no time. And so that creates challenges because unfortunately the repeat offenders start to get wind of it and they realize that there's really not that much consequences in some of these crimes.
I've been saying for a year that that's the backdoor way of imposing bail reform or criminal justice reform, is by refusing to build capacity in your prison space. And California has probably been leading the charge on that. New York is too right now, where they're wanting to build a new jail and close down Rikers, but it'll have 1/3 of the jail space. So that's an easy backdoor way to impose criminal justice reform. You just don't have any capacity to hold anybody.
Well, and the other thing is that in California, as you may know, in 2011, our governor passed a bill called AB 109, it's called realignment. I always sarcastically say anytime somebody uses the word realignment, it means it's a dump on the locals. And so what that did in California was that it mandated that certain state prison inmates be housed locally. And so, historically, our jails were never designed to be long-term facilities. And so now they've got these lawsuits over healthcare and making sure that they're providing them sufficient healthcare. So that's created, significant challenges as well.
California, when they hit their capacity, it seems like the litigation has always focused on the providing appropriate medical care. And I think that if you go to the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, where they, the consent decree, or not even the consent decree, but the federal court order that was imposed on them by a 3-judge panel, where it was affirmed 5-4, the dissent noted, we're not releasing the people that they weren't able to provide medical care to. We're doing an across the board release. And I think one of the dissenters, like, when you release the equivalent of a brigade of criminals, you shouldn't expect anything else but more crime. And that's what they've gotten.
Well, historically, unfortunately, the recidivism rate doesn't change that much over time. And so people, we had the early releases in California when COVID happened, and we started tracking them. And it was, we had some, like in Sacramento County, I think when I was still there, we had like 5,200 people released early, and there was like 4,000 rearrests. So it's like not all like they all of a sudden just, rehabilitate.
Today we're going to talk about the Soros or the soft-on crime prosecutors that have been elected, and I think we mentioned before we started that sometimes they defeat themselves after 1 or 2 terms, or they get removed, or they get recalled. But I kind of want to concentrate on how do we prevent these people from being elected in the first place? Because they are organized, well funded, and they throw a lot of money at races that are usually decided by 25% of the amount of money they provide.
100%. I myself went through this type of campaign. I was the elected DA in Sacramento, and then my second term, somebody ran against me and decided, as I would say, quote unquote, to become a Soros type of candidate. Obviously for the money purposes. And it's, I was prepared because I understood what was going on. I had been watching races around the country. If you kind of follow Soros, he started this whole movement in Chicago when Anita Alvarez, who's like this real prosecutor, career prosecutor, gets just blindsided and gets removed. And we see the consequences of that. And so it's, the reality for prosecutors is we don't go into this business to be politicians. We don't go into this business to go out and raise a bunch of money. We're in it because we believe in public safety. We want to support victims' rights and all of those things. And so I think what's happened over the last 10 years or so is that Soros just they're smart. I'm not going to deny that. They pick the right jurisdictions. They typically focus in on certain places there. They think, they can blindside somebody, and a lot of times it works. And, there's maps now where you can kind of study that they control large percentages of population. So it's very concerning. Very concerning.
I would say they pick Democrat strongholds where if they could just knock off the Democrat in a primary, a lot of times, that was it. That was the whole race. And
well, look at Krasner. That's the perfect example. Larry Krasner, who came in 2018. He's a defense attorney who's just his whole life was about suing police officers and things like that. He gets elected, and he just won again last week in Philadelphia.
As time has passed, we find more and more information about these groups, but they go and specifically recruit soft on crime people. So they have a whole group that goes and finds them and funds them for the election, and then they have a second group that comes in and invites them to seminars and said, here's the policies that you need to enact. And they all enact the same policies, and they're just, some of them are just atrocious. But then they have the third group that does these I call them pseudoscience reports, that says when you enact these policies, they won't impact crime, or they'll make us safer, which is just ludicrous. And then they kind of have this fourth group that does press releases for them to sell these changes to the voters. Looking back now, I would say they've committed fraud, because you and I, when something doesn't work for 5 years, we say, okay, that didn't work and we need to change. I don't think they would admit today that what they've done has harmed our urban cities, and that they've hurt the very people that they claim that they want to help. But
well, I think that's very true. Very true. The people they claim they're helping tends to be the communities that are the most impacted by crime in the first place.
I would say this is a repeat of the 60s, where we felt more safe, we were more forgiving, and then in our laws, so we had more people get released from jail, we started having crime go up, and then we had this whole fight about how to address it, and we had one side of one party refused to participate, and the people that called for a change ultimately were the pastors in the urban areas. And so you see that today. Where you see a lot of these prosecutors that don't survive a second election, or they get recalled, or they get removed by the governor of Florida, it's because the public just can't. The public's the one saying, we can't stand this anymore.
Well, I think San Francisco is a perfect kind of example. One of the things I learned over the 30 years, really mostly when I was elected, is that, most Americans don't really follow public safety policy. They don't, excuse my language, they don't really, quote, care about it until they're personally affected. And then what happens is a horrible tragedy occurs, There was one in particular in California with a murder of a woman in her own home by an individual that had been released early. And when something like that happens, then all of a sudden, what do you mean we have a
Yeah.
policy against any bail enhancements or a policy against gun enhancements? What do you mean that we're going to let people out of prison early? And then all of a sudden they're outraged. And so, people are just living their lives. They're raising their families, they're doing their daily life. And then all of a sudden they get hit by some horrible crime. And that's when people start to recognize it. So in Los Angeles County, I mean, I think Gascon's perhaps most fatal mistake was he came in and dropped an atomic bomb on
Yeah.
December 7th of 2020, and he announced all these blanket policies, and that just started the firestorm. And it was even the media turned against him to some extent, or at least reported it. And then it was a firestorm, and then it was this whole process of trying to get a recall, and people are outraged, and people of all communities, whether it's African Americans, Asians, whites, whatever it is, are like, what do you mean you're not going to charge my son's killer with gun enhancement, or he's a gang member and now you're going to let him out of prison? So I think when people start to realize it's really because of the consequences. But the challenge, I think, for us in this industry is that it's too late, really almost too late, to stop the madness if they're elected. We've got to prevent them from being elected, because I mean, you look at the damage that's been done by Chesa Bodine or Pamela Price or George Gascon or Kim Fox or any of these people that are just wreaking havoc on public safety.
Well, I mean, okay, let's compare what you've just talked about. Let's compare that to Texas, because we've got some Soros elected DAs, Dallas, and we've
Right,
got a new one
right.
in Harris County.
Austin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in Austin, San Antonio. But Texas kind of has always been a right of center state, so it has kind of its built-in push to moderate these policies. I mean, Harris County had a DA who was a Soros-supported DA,
Right.
and she would not carry the water like they wanted, and so they quit supporting her, and that's the reason why we have the new DA. I mean, what?
Well, she came out, I mean, Kim Ogg, to her credit, and I don't know her, but she, to her credit, came out with that very scathing bail report that said this is not working. The zero bail is not working. And then all of a sudden they turn on her and they basically throw her out of office.
Yeah, she came out with a report, challenging the moderator who was hired by the county to defend the settlement. And we're talking about misdemeanor bonds, releasing everybody on personal bond. I mean, we've talked about that at length, but I mean, it's not like Gascon did not have some indication. There was 2 attempted removals for him, and he still didn't moderate. I mean, I would argue that if there hadn't been gamesmanship on the signatures, he would have been removed instead of getting 25% of the vote in the primary when he was running for reelection. I mean,
Right.
why did he resist, do you think, the push? I mean, all those pushes to moderate.
Well, I think there's 2 potential scenarios, and I'm not in his head. So one scenario is that he truly believes in the ideology, or secondly is he truly believes in the all-powerful money component, which is, if you want to be supported by, the Soros network, as I would call it, then you got to stick to it. I mean, when I was running for reelection in 2018, these groups would send you these questionnaires, and I'm like, I'm not answering these. They were like, do you commit to XYZ? Do you commit to XYZ? You must, sign these things. And then when myself and most of my colleagues refused to even engage in this behavior, they come out with, these terrible social media posts, refuse this, that, and the other thing. And it's hardball for sure. But as a prosecutor, the most important thing you can do is you stay true to who you are, you stay true to your mission, and you don't get bullied. It's a lot of bullying. And when I say there's a network, there is a network. They're very sophisticated, and they understand what they're doing.
But it was my understanding that Gascon withstood 2 recall pushes, but at the end, when he ran for reelection, he really didn't receive any money from the Soros network. So it's like they pushed him. They then saw he wasn't going to get reelected. He was going to get beat bad, and so they didn't even give him any money in the end.
Well, I think, again, not to give them too much credit. I mean, they know what they're doing. They're polling. They're going to do their internal polling, and they're going to see that this is a lost cause, and they're going to move on, and they're going to spend their money in some other venue that, I mean, obviously, as blue as California is, the voters have woken up in the
Yeah.
three most urban cities, LA, San Francisco, and Alameda County, have thrown out essentially these rogue prosecutors.
Well, when we look at the calculus that Soros and his groups made, they saw that the power and the discretion that the district attorneys held in prosecuting crime, and
Right.
and they also saw too the impact of donations 3 or 4 times what's normally raised in a race and what impact that have. But the miscalculation they made was that that their reforms, what they were pushing, that would somehow not impact crime. And that one is the hard one for me. I mean, let's change it. If you want to give them a good intent, their original thought was we're going to do this in the Democrat areas, and we're going to show how successful this is, and that crime doesn't increase when you're more forgiving on these criminal laws, and then we're going to take that nationwide. And it blew up in their face from that standpoint.
It blew up in their face. I think part of the reason it's blown up, particularly in California, is you're looking at a state where the policies that we've adopted over the last, say, 10 years have suddenly come to be in everybody's face. I mean, you drive down the street in any city, and all you're seeing is drug addiction, fentanyl, homelessness, rampant theft. I mean, I just finished up helping on a ballot measure here in California that would kind of roll back some of the ballot measure, like Prop 47, which we had a number of years ago, and it passed by 70%. In it blew it, and in it, I think we won every county, and that's because Californians are fed up. Listen, we're compassionate people. We want to help people. We want people to be on track. But if we're not going to give tools to law enforcement and to prosecutors, we're going to change the system, and that's really kind of what's happened here. Is I think, crime has did rise in these urban cities. I think a lot of places it's risen. And so to a large extent, it's not just the tough on crime thing, it's just we want balance. And right now we're out of balance.
One of the ways, like you mentioned about all this homelessness and all this drug use, about how we're out of balance is, there's no incentive, there's no hammer to get people to either straighten up or to
Right.
isolate them away from society. We've made it where, I mean, I've been saying for a while that we're now at the point where mental health issues can be the king's X for prosecution of crime. And and I know when the career criminals realize that, then suddenly they've got a mental health issue because
Yeah.
and they'll
Yeah,
use
I
that
think that's true.
and
I
they'll use
mean,
it until they can no longer king's X criminal prosecution. Same with, I mean, drugs. I have a personal history with drug issues. I have a sister who had a 30-year prescription painkiller problem following a car accident. And, you have to give them a reason to go to rehab or they won't go. I
yeah, and
mean,
that was part of our ballot measure here in California, is that we adopted these very lax policies on drug treatment. And so the ballot measure essentially said if you have 3 or more convictions for drug, it's going to be a potential felony, but you can eliminate all that by just going to drug treatment. I mean, we want people in drug treatment. That's what they need. So we're very hopeful. A lot of the issues are going to be now whether our government funds it, which they seem to be resistant to at this point. But hopefully they're going to listen to what the voters want.
but one of the problems with drug treatment is, it's got like a 25% success rate. So you got a 75% failure rate. So you have to keep coming up with new incentives for people to want to go to drug rehab because it's at the end of the day, they have to decide to make the change. And
Absolutely.
sometimes that change is for families, sometimes that change is because they don't want to go to prison. But when we take away the prison component and we really can't force them to go to drug rehab, I mean, we're just creating new customers every day for Narcan to go and try to keep people from overdosing as we set new records every month. It's
I
ridiculous.
think there's 2 parts to me in terms of the drug issue. One is that we got to hammer the dealers, particularly the fentanyl dealers, particularly the ones that are using guns. And then secondly, we've got to create that hammer essentially for the people that are in that cycle of addiction. And, doesn't mean they have to go to prison, but they've got, I mean, there's an advocate from San Francisco, a guy who's wonderful. His name's Tom Wolfe. And Tom he'll tell you that he, got into drugs and was homeless and all that stuff. And he'll tell you that it took him going to jail, I don't know, 6 times to
Yeah.
finally say, I'm done. I want to get out of this. I want to get back to my family. And now he is perhaps one of the most vocal advocates for this balanced policy of
I was
treatment.
dealing with my sister, 30 years ago. I was a brand new attorney. I mean, with a whole bunch of debt. And,
Right.
jail was poor families, drug rehab.
Yep.
And I mean, so I look at that a lot of times today, we're taking away the poor families' opportunity to get their children, their husbands, their wives clean, because we're really taking that off the table. And and I'm not let's put them all in jail, but I'm saying if they're not going to take the advantage of going to drug rehab, then what else can we do? I mean, except isolate them away in prison for a period of time until again they have an incentive to go. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, that
Well, I
used to
think
be
people don't change until they want to change. That's the bottom line.
I mean, that used to be well, I mean, that is one of the theories that we teach in our criminology classes. It's just it used to be mainstream thought. Now it's not anymore, and I kind of think we're kind of going back to it now. But here we are faced with these. I would say soft on crime prosecutors. I mean, when you got someone who used to be a public defender now setting policy as the new DA, and
Right.
when you have these DAs come in and they mass fire a whole bunch of career
Right.
prosecutors, which you see over and over again with Soros supported DAs. I mean,
100%.
talk about what happens when you come in and you lose all of your experienced prosecutors. What does that do to a DA's office?
Well, I mean, imagine, I guess the analogy would be, let's say you go into a hospital system and you fire all the neurosurgeons
Yeah.
that are going to conduct brain surgery. I mean, it's like, do you feel safe with the former public defender now coming in and handling your child's murder case? No, I mean, that's the problem, is that you're losing, it's not just losing individuals, you're losing institutional knowledge. I mean, it's no different than any other profession, that
Yeah.
you want to have the most experienced people handling the most serious cases. And what you're seeing, I think this is true in Austin, is that they've lost some of the best and the brightest because they've left because they don't agree with the policies. And so now you have these inexperienced, kind of woke-minded, like-minded people that their goal is not necessarily the same goal that you would have prior to the change at guard. That makes sense.
Hey, I've told a client this one time. It's like when you hire me and you get the benefit of the 30 years of mistakes that I've made and that
Yeah,
I've
that's,
learned from.
yeah,
When you come in and fire all of your experienced prosecutors, you lose immediately the benefit of the
right.
knowledge of the mistakes that they have made in the past, and they're not going to make again. And so
100%.
and so
Yep.
you've got to now hire new people who have to go through all of that process of making mistakes again. I mean, there was a period of time where I was, the fix-it guy in a large firm. If you had a problem and you didn't know how to fix it, you came to me because I was an appellate attorney. And so that's what you lose. You lose all the knowledge of the fix-its for the mistakes.
And it's the judgment issue as well. I mean, if you have a 30-year prosecutor, 20 to 30-year prosecutor, it's not just what they've done in a courtroom, it's their exercising of sound judgment and making decisions on, what do you charge, how do you charge it, what is an appropriate disposition of this case, all of those things that go into life experiences. Whereas if you just bring in somebody that's, their whole life has been as a public defender, it's not the same lens that you're looking through. It's not the same job, really.
George Soros is kind of retired. He's turned it over to his son, Alex, um, and he's, from what I hear, he's even worse than his dad. I mean, what do you think? I mean, have they drank the Kool-Aid, or do you think they have other motives?
The Soros group.
Yeah. Mhm.
Oh, I think they drank the Kool-Aid a long time ago. I mean, I don't profess to be a complete expert on Soros, but I have studied enough of kind of their tactics. I've seen, you know, protests outside police officers' houses where there's websites on the bottom of signs, and I'm like, who paid for that sign? And so I just think they're this massive network. I mean, if you look at the photographs of the politicians they're there with and who supports them and who doesn't support them, and it is ultimately, to me, it's about power. That's what it's about, power and money. And, if you're willing to throw $1 million into a little local DA's race, that's a pretty powerful message that they're going to carry.
I have argued for probably since the midterms, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, that I thought that, one of our national parties had outsourced its criminal justice reform policy, its bail reform policy, and its immigration policy. And they have outsourced it to advocacy groups like Soros. I think he's been kind of doing their policy on criminal justice reform. And the problem is when you outsource your policy initiatives to advocates, advocates will not admit they're wrong because their advocacy is what brings them money. And so
Absolutely.
that's the reason
Right.
why you have to take advice from advocacy groups, but then you have to decide what is right. And then when it doesn't work, you have to change it. The advocacy groups are always going to say, and you've heard this, and we've heard this in the New York reform debate, it just needs more time. We just need more time to let it take shape. And so, so kind of let's talk about how do we defeat someone we've identified as a candidate who's running with the support of George Soros, and how do we stop them from winning in today's time?
Well, one of the things I remember telling a colleague, another elected DA one day, is that the day that you're sworn in as the elected DA is the day you start running for reelection. So I might have been sworn in 2018 and I have a 4-year term, but you're running for reelection every day. And to me, what that means is that you are present in your community, you are doing your outreach. I mean, listen, let's be honest. People, vote based upon name ID, based upon ballot titles. And so being present, and it's not just about being out there in your community, but it's about raising money the entire time, because as DAs, like I said, we don't like to raise money, but you have to get to that mindset that you are the cause. It's easy to go out and ask, can you give me $1,000 to help, fight cancer? It's tough to go say, can you give me $1,000 so I can get reelected? But you have to realize from a lens point of view that you are the cause, because you're there as a real prosecutor to enhance public safety, to protect victims' rights. And so the way, to me, that you not only defeat a Soros candidate is, one, you are a good DA, you're in your community, you're doing the right thing, but you're also going to raise money. But to defeat those Soros-minded rogue prosecutors, truthfully, you got to raise a lot of money, and you've got to raise awareness, whether that's through TV, social media, whatever it is. But you've got to publicize the as I call it, the consequences of crime. So when you're trying to throw out someone like Chesa Boudin, it is critically important that you constantly tell the public the consequences of these poor policies. And that's why I think he lost so badly. That's why I think Gascon lost so badly and Pamela Price, because I mean, for 4 years, it was relentless. The news stories, and the community starts to rise up, and the grassroots network starts to say, "What do you mean? Why? How can this be happening?" And then they start carrying the mantle of demonstrating why this is really bad policy.
I mean, I just remember it made the national news and went around everywhere when Gascon's office was talked about, was contacted about a criminal, or no, a victim, and that them having an issue about something going on in a case, and the response from Gascon's office is, well, we just have a disagreement on who the real victim is. And so their press office was saying that they thought that the criminal was the real victim. And in social justice, uh, when social justice is leading your policy directives, I guess that's one of the things you
Right.
could come out with. But I mean, I just thought, when I heard that, my first reaction was when the defense attorney's arguing for the defendant, when the prosecutor's arguing for the defendant, who in the freaking courtroom is arguing for the victim? No one.
No one is. I mean, the other one that's a really stark example that Gascon instituted was that no prosecutor could appear at a parole hearing. And so, you got a guy that's coming up for parole and he's been in prison for however long, the victims have a right to be at that parole hearing. Nobody's there. They're just sitting there by themselves. And it was devastating to these families because that's not their job. Their job is not to play the prosecutor. Their job is not to tell the parole board how many times their child was stabbed to death. It is re-traumatizing. And so, I'm quite confident that Nathan Hochman changed that policy, like probably on day one. But it becomes a one-sided system when you have a prosecutor who is there only to support the releases of these inmates.
Is there any way do you think that we can help create groups to kind of mirror the groups that the Soros groups have set up? I'm not talking about having seminars where we set up policies that are strong on crime, but I'm talking about, we've got to respond to these pseudoscience reports that come out saying, because you saw this when for years they did these reports saying, when you do this, this will not increase crime. Crime is not going up. Just look at the FBI statistics. And then, in October, suddenly the FBI statistics were changed and crime was up. One of these groups immediately issued a report within a week saying, well, it's not because of bail reform.
And those groups they're all funded. It's all part of the network. So, I think there's efforts. I mean, the reality is that there's never really been an infrastructure. Soros has a network. Let's be honest. They have Californians for Safety and Justice. They have this group or that group all over the country. And what really needs to happen, and I think there's some movement towards this, is to create an infrastructure where there's an advocacy group that can step into these kinds of races and help support real prosecutors, either keep their jobs or elect them in whatever the jurisdiction is that they're running.
Well, we need more coordination. I mean, whatever groups there are, there needs to be more coordination. I've got a great example of that. In the November election, there was a group statewide in Texas that ran these really powerful ads about victims, and the end of the commercial was vote Republican judges, just to get rid of these soft on crime people. And the problem is they were running them in all of our major cities. Well, Harris County, every contested race that every incumbent that had an opponent, the incumbent lost. But they also ran these ads, but they didn't have enough people running against incumbents. And then in Bexar County, which is San Antonio, they ran these ads and none of the incumbents had an opponent. So that was money wasted because they were powerful ads, but they weren't going to do any good there.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of strategy, and you're right. It's got to be some kind of coordination.
Yeah. And I mean, we don't need, I think one of the lessons here is you don't need the level of coordination that they're using on their side, because over time they defeat themselves because these policies are so bad. But we don't want the damage in the interim for the first year or first 2 years. We want to be able to, we want to be able to put out credible packets that say, this is what will happen if a Soros DA, we want to poison the very name of Soros supporting somebody. And it has to come out because he's throwing a large, they're going to have money like nobody's had in that county for a DA race ever.
Right. It's definitely more preventive than anything else.
Well, if we could come out with some kind of way to coordinate that, and I think that's doable. I mean, in Harris County, when the new DA won, he won by 1 or 2 points, and the Republicans put no money in that race. If they'd have put any money in that race, I don't think he would have won.
Interesting. Yeah. I learned a long time ago, you don't have to raise, dollar for dollar. You just have to have the facts of the policy on your side, and you have to have enough money to get that message out. I mean, I've been involved in ballot measures where we were outspent 35-1 and we still won, but that's because we were able to get our message out and demonstrate to the public, why this was an important policy.
For somebody who gets outspent like that, I mean, how do you create press? I mean, normally when you're killed by that amount of number, your message doesn't even get out. So how do you get your message out in that situation?
You can do a lot of grassroots, whether it's social media or whatever. You raise enough to be able to get to the places. I mean, in California, most of these elections are decided in Los Angeles, statewide elections, Los Angeles County, because it's 10 million people that live there. But it just depends on what the particular issue is. I mean, one of the things I worked on was death penalty reform. And so there's been many efforts to get rid of the death penalty in California. We basically don't have it anymore because our governor put a moratorium. But Californians, time and time again, have voted to keep the death penalty because when you see the facts of these crimes, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like less than 1% of the people that commit murders are getting death penalty. And I'm not a rabid dog about the death penalty. My position has been let a jury make a decision and whatever happens, happens. But that's an example that when the voters hear about what, defendant Doe did to this child or multiple children or serial rapes or whatever, serial murders, then you can win on the policy, even if you don't have as much money as the other side.
Okay, I'm in Texas. Texas is going to have a very right of center approach to the death penalty, and I mean, that's probably where I sit. I'm probably even further right than that. But I had a judge tell me one time that they had a voir dire where the defense attorney was asking people, "Can you administer the death penalty?" And there was one guy sitting there, and he was like, "I don't know, I don't know." And so he thought he had a maybe a good potential juror. And the guy thought about it for a few minutes, and finally said, "Well, if it's on my day off, I can go to Austin and I can administer the death penalty."
Oh, wow,
That's
that's
probably the way
interesting.
Texas is, but I go back to this, and I think we forget, especially I don't like these movies coming out where we're trying to show that the villain of this previous movie, if we just knew them a little bit better, then they're not really the victim. I mean, the evil queen and Snow White, and then we've got the Broadway musical about the queen or the witch from the Yellow Brick Road. I don't like those movies because I don't want us celebrating or um, cheapening evil people because you know I mean I just believe the Bible says that we're all bad until we choose to, through the grace of God, to accept Him. And I think there's a lot of different philosophies that say that at our heart we're not good. And so if we're not good, if we're bad, I mean, it's hard for me to say, I agree with you. Let the jury decide. And if the jury decides that the crime was so bad that it warrants the most awful punishment that we have for that, then so be it. It's got to be bad.
Right. I mean, I think that, with the exception of sociopaths like the Golden State Killer, I mean, most people that engage in criminal behavior have their own baggage. They arrived because of their own traumas, and we have to acknowledge that. But that doesn't mean that we don't hold them accountable. And that's why every case is different. That's why, in my opinion, blanket policies like Gascon had don't work because you're not looking at the facts of the case, you're not looking at their individual backgrounds, and you're not really addressing the consequences of those crimes. So that's where I think you have to get, that's why that institutional knowledge and the maturity of judgment becomes so important because you have to be able to weigh that. As a prosecutor, I mean, listen, I realize we have a lot of power, a lot of power. You have the power to put somebody in prison for a really, really long time, or you can make a decision based upon whatever the facts and circumstances are, his or her criminal record. That's where that maturity of judgment becomes so, so important, and blanket policies don't get to that.
That's one of the reasons why I don't like charge-based release systems because it's the same thing. It's a blanket policy. You don't look at anybody's criminal history. You just say, okay, you're charged with this, so here's what you get.
Yeah.
It's across the board, no bail. It's across the board release on zero bail. It's across the board release on a personal bond. I mean, even if they have a 10-year criminal history, and I mean, like you said,
Yeah.
the goal of the criminal justice system is to evaluate each person individually. And I
Correct.
think uh, And the reason why that's changing is because of paranoia. I think these activist groups have really pushed the paranoia. You're being treated unfairly. These other people are being treated differently. And so you should
Right.
get angry. And I think we've done a disservice to our criminal justice system. And I don't know how to fix that part of it because I think that's not going to change anytime soon.
Well, I think part of it is just having, as I say, real prosecutors in that, elected DA position, because you want that experience, you want that, that person that has the knowledge and all that, that's not going to just adopt these policies that are check boxes for the people that supported you and gave you money.
Well, so what does the future hold? What does the future hold for keeping or preventing Soros DAs from getting elected? Is it sunny? Is it bright? Is it mixed? It's hard to
I
overcome
think,
money.
I think it's what happened in California is a bright spot because the voters, woke up and realized this is not good policy. But do I think George Soros or his network is going away? No, I don't think they're going away. I think they're smart. I think they're going to continue to look for opportunities where they can essentially infiltrate a system. Krasner is a perfect example. I didn't look to see if Soros gave him money in this round, but the longer they're in, the more challenging it is because that means they have name ID. That means that they have a ballot title, those kinds of things. And there's a certain level of fatigue. I mean, how many times do we have to come in and try to, get rid of this horrible DA or whatever it is? So, but yes, money is a big part of it. And it's creating, essentially a fund that we can go in and help, prosecutors that are, sitting prosecutors that are doing their jobs, keep their jobs, or to elect people that are going to do the true job of a prosecutor.
I'm very hopeful, but I'm hopeful probably for a different reason. I just think these policies are completely unsustainable. I mean, look at the impact that these policies have had on LA County. I mean,
Right.
in San Francisco. I mean, look at the value of our commercial properties, how they just have nosedived
Yep.
in those areas.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it doesn't take very long for the elected officials for the cities to suddenly say our tax revenues are going way, way down, and we can't withstand that very much. And so, I mean, you've seen some calls, and the first calls have been coming from the mayors because of their tax revenue. So I'm just hopeful for that reason. But the money is, I mean, they don't have to throw a bunch of money at a DA race to have a big impact for 2 years or 4 years.
Right. I mean, I think whether or not a mayor decides to support, or oppose a Soros candidate is dependent on the jurisdiction. I think where you're starting to see, and it is related to property values, is the business community is getting involved because, as you say, there's these places where the buildings are vacant because people are too scared to walk down the street, and so they're losing all of that. And then so the businesses are losing money, the government's losing money, and obviously something's got to give. So I mean, the bottom line, like for me, that I've learned is doesn't matter what people's walk of life is, they just want to live in a safe community and raise their children in a safe environment and to be able to go to the park during the day or on the weekends. And when people start getting afraid to just carry on their everyday life, that is when I think changes can occur.
Well, and also we've already said this once, but when the very group they say they're wanting to help is the group that's getting hurt the most by these policies,
Right.
then something will change. And I saw that in just last couple of weeks where there was a protest group protesting against another protest group, and the police were not doing anything. Well, suddenly, you're not protecting me, so I'm going to defend myself. And so their battles
Right.
break out between the two groups. Suddenly, the police get involved very quickly. And then
Right.
I think we just in the last couple of days had something like that happen in Seattle, where a
Right.
religious group went to a park and they got attacked by
Right.
some the opposite
Right.
political spectrum groups, and I think even the mayor attacked the religious groups for how dare you have a prayer session in this hotbed. It's like you're
Yeah,
not
it's a
welcome
hot
here.
mess. It's definitely a hot mess in some of the places that we're seeing this happen.
Is
So.
there a middle ground on this issue? Because I don't think there is. I think we have to
On
just
the
go to
issue
feeling.
of criminal justice and the Soros minded, I don't think there's a middle ground. I think, I think any real prosecutor is going to tell you that they believe not just in accountability, but they believe in rehabilitation.
Mhm.
That's 95% of the people that go to prison are coming out. So if we want a safer community, we want to make sure those people have the tools and the resources and the treatment that they need to be a functioning, law-abiding citizen. That's what we want. So what oftentimes happens in these Soros jurisdictions is they'll come in and they'll crucify the elected DA and say, oh, they don't believe in rehab, they don't believe in reentry, they don't believe in prevention, and that's not true. But we have, as a profession, have an obligation to do better in the sense of we have to tell the world what we do. Most people don't even know what a DA. You ask somebody, what's a prosecutor do? Oh, are you the one that defends somebody? That's because they're, like I say, they're just living their lives. So the more we can do to educate our constituents, to tell people what we really do. I mean, when I was in Sacramento, we had every type of collaborative court you can imagine to keep people out of the system: veterans court, mental health court, diversion courts, treatment courts, drug courts, all of this stuff. But if we don't tell that, then the other side is going to sit there and say, all you do is incarcerate people. I'm like, well, that's not true. So it's our job to tell the world that that's what we do.
But isn't the lesson from 10 years of these policies is they're really just to say we need to put up with more crime, because that's really all they've got us is more crime, and they don't want to change. They won't admit it's not working, and so we have to. The public is not going to put up with more crime, and
Right.
you compare this to immigration. On immigration, oh, we can't fix it. We need a bill. We can't do it, and then we get a new president, and suddenly we can address immigration or illegal immigration effectively with the laws that we have. We know how to fight crime. We know what we need to do to lower crime. It's just we have people that are coming in with pseudoscience and crazy ideas and saying this will not affect crime. This will not increase crime. A lot of times they don't even say it will decrease crime. They just say it won't increase it. We have years of proof showing that crime has gone up, and they still won't admit it.
The other thing about crime, and when they sit there, crime is, stable or it's not gone up. Just because somebody doesn't report crime doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that's one of the most glaring fallacies of their argument, is that, like in California, people got so sick of theft that they don't even call the cops anymore. That doesn't mean that theft doesn't happen. It's rampant in many of these places. People don't, I mean, I would be venture to guess that, 1 out of 100 people that goes into an X shop to steal is not getting reported. It's all either unreported or it's dealt with internally. And so that's where we're just lying, because we're not being honest about how much crime really is existing.
I tell people, if you want to know how crime is really where it really is look at the crime stats on carjacking, because the insurance companies still require a police report before they're going to pay you for that car, and those are pretty dramatic,
Oh,
and
well,
they're
that's good
going
to
in the
know.
wrong direction.
Yeah.
What can we do to help out? When we identify someone that's running with a whole bunch of support with Soros making crazy allegations against an incumbent, what can we do?
I think help support, real candidates, whether it's financially, whether it's through getting out the vote, whether it's just raising awareness. The bottom line is that we can't just expect that somebody's going to get elected. You have to support. I mean, the campaigns cost money. That's a reality of the world. And so, being mindful of when are these elections coming up, who's on the ballot, educating your friends and family. And because sometimes people look to you because you're the expert in the field and they say, well, what do you think of this person or that person? But the bottom line, sadly, is that it's about raising money and having the resources to support, those true public safety minded prosecutors.
Well, I think we need to also get more coordinated, and we need to set up some groups that offset the funding, because I think it's not, we can't expect a county to raise $4 million to offset Soros when
Right.
their races never really ever get to 100,000 in the past 12 years.
Right.
So
Right.
we've got to have some kind of group standing standing I guess, in the batter's box, ready to come in
Right.
with money. And then we got to have some coordination with that. And then we need some coordination with these ad groups to have really effective ads that give people a reason why to vote. And while that takes money, but it also, I mean, the people that come up with these ads are talented people. So if we could get some groups in waiting for the funding to help with the funding to offset Soros's groups and people to sell the story of why people should reject Soros and why they should support their local. Because I think in Texas, I mean, people would be rejected just to have local control. Do you want somebody deciding your race that's coming from
Right.
California with $4
Right.
million or from New York or wherever outside of Texas? So I think
Well, there's also usual suspects. Like every race that I've seen where there's a Soros type of candidate, there's the usual suspects of people, mostly California, mostly women from, very, very wealthy families that are giving exorbitant amounts of money. And I could rattle them off because they're all part of the same network. This person gives this money, this person, I'll give you $1 million to match it. And it's really two things is California wealthy women are basically electing prosecutors in other jurisdictions. And it's this outside money that's coming into local races and deciding to fate because they think their ideology is good for small town America. And that's what's really concerning is that it is a group of primarily women from California that are funding these races.
heard that before. And I've seen stories of people going to go meet with them to see if they can get their support. But are they ideologically driven or are they just
I think so. The names are right there. Patty Quillen, Reed Hastings, Elizabeth Simons. They're all mostly the tech money people. Reed Hastings is the Netflix guy. And so I think in Krasner's race, at least that I saw today, is I think Patty Quillen gave money to him as well. It's just this little group of people that are making decisions for the rest of the country.
it's this little status group that you're in this group, you're deciding elections, or what is their ideology? Is it we need to be more forgiving, or these people
I
just
don't know.
because of their baggage? I can't, when I sit and think about it, what is their rationale? I can't get there.
I don't know the rationale. What I believe is that they live behind their nice gates and they're not subject to the same kinds of crime that people in urban cities have to live with. And so they don't understand that. And so it's easy to throw your money at candidates without understanding the true realities of crime. So it's concerning, but it is the same cast of characters that are in most of these races.
Well, we've said it twice. Say it one more time. They're always going to be safe. They have the financial resources to have their own safety net.
Right. Right.
But they are pushing policies that are having a very negative impact on people who cannot provide their own safety.
That's
and,
right.
And they're the groups getting hurt the worst. The very groups they're saying they're trying to help. And I mean, I said that to someone on a podcast, and you would have thought that I had shot them with a gun. I mean, they hadn't even thought about that before.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
like 50% of all murder victims in the United States are black males. They're predominantly killed by young black males, and these policies somehow have decided to favor the shooter over the victim.
Right. Right. That's right.
Well, that's kind of a weird place to end, but I was really kind of wanting to end on the hopeful part instead of but
Well, I think we are hopeful in the sense that the more you do like this to raise awareness, the more that's done, in actual local races, the more I do think there's definitely way more awareness now than there was even 4 years ago.
well, I would like to say the tide has turned, but maybe it has not turned completely. Maybe we're turning it with putting our spotlight on it for whatever small audience we have, but as a resource for people going forward is what we can do to improve the criminal justice system instead of destroy it, which I think what these policies do.
Right, for sure. I definitely think the most important thing is to stay vigilant. That's what I'd say.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming back, and it's good to see you again.
You too, Ken. Have a good day. Thanks so much.
Next time I'll have white hair, I'm afraid.
I hope not. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening, and come back for the next episode of The Bell Post.